In 2018, a woman in Ohio bought a used Honda Civic from a private seller she found online. The listing was perfect. Detailed maintenance records, clean photos, a price slightly below market value. She test drove it. Everything felt right. She paid $8,000 in cash. 11 days later, the transmission failed catastrophically on a highway at 70 miles per hour. A mechanic discovered the car had been in a severe flood 6 months earlier. The interior had been professionally dried, the electronics cleaned, the carpets replaced. Nothing in the listing mentioned flood damage. The title had been washed, transferred through multiple states to remove the salvage designation. The seller knew. The buyer could not have known. And the $8,000 was gone. This is not a story about one dishonest seller. This is a story about the fundamental architecture of any market where one side knows more than the other, and the economist who proved mathematically that this imbalance can destroy entire economies. In 1970, a young economist named George Akerlof at the University of California at Berkeley published a 13-page paper with a deceptively simple title: The Market for Lemons: Quality Uncertainty and the Market Mechanism. He submitted it to the American Economic Review. They rejected it, calling the argument trivial. He sent it to the Review of Economic Studies. They rejected it, saying if the conclusion were correct, economics would already have noticed. A third journal rejected it for being too obvious to publish. 31 years later, Akerlof received the Nobel Prize in Economics for this trivial paper. It is now one of the most cited works in the history of the discipline, and its logic explains everything from the 2008 financial crisis to why you hesitate before buying anything from a stranger on the internet. Here is what Akerlof proved, translated from the mathematics into a scene you can picture. A small-town used car lot on a Saturday morning. 20 cars lined up on the pavement. Half of them are genuinely good vehicles. Akerlof called them peaches. The other half have hidden defects. He called them lemons, borrowing American slang for a defective car. A seller with a peach knows the car is worth $2,000. A seller with a lemon knows it is worth $1,000. Buyers would happily pay $2,400 for a confirmed peach and $1,200 for a confirmed lemon. But the buyers walking onto that lot cannot tell which is which. The paint shines equally on both. The engines sound similar. The lemons have been cleaned, detailed, and photographed to look identical to the peaches. Knowing that roughly half the cars are lemons, a rational buyer calculates the expected value, about $1,800, and offers that price for any car on the lot. Now the trap springs. The owner of a genuine peach knows the car is worth $2,000. She is not going to sell it for $1,800. She drives it home. Next Saturday, the lot has fewer peaches and more lemons. Buyers notice the shift. They lower their offers. More peach owners withdraw. The cycle accelerates. Akerlof called this adverse selection. The bad drives out the good, not through competition, but through the inability of the good to prove its quality. Left unchecked, the market collapses entirely. Only the worst cars remain. The buyers stop coming. The lot closes. This is not a theory about used cars. It is a theory about every market where one side knows more than the other. And that is nearly every market in existence. Walk into the health insurance market, and the same dynamic is operating at a scale that affects hundreds of millions of lives. An insurance company offers a plan priced on the average health risk of the population. The healthiest people, the peaches, look at the premium and think it is too expensive for someone who rarely gets sick. They opt out or choose a minimal plan. The people who remain are disproportionately those who know they will need extensive care, the lemons. The average risk in the pool climbs. The insurer raises premiums to cover the sicker population. More healthy people leave. The pool gets sicker and more expensive. Premiums rise again. Actuaries call this the death spiral. It is the reason health insurance markets in every developed nation require mandates, subsidies, or heavy regulation to function. Without intervention, the lemon dynamic would destroy the market, leaving the people who need insurance most unable to obtain it at any price. The Affordable Care Act's individual mandate was, in economic terms, a direct attempt to force the peaches to stay in the pool and prevent adverse selection from collapsing the market. Now walk into a human resources office. An employer posting a job faces the same asymmetry as the car buyer. Some applicants are peaches, talented and honest, while others are lemons, underqualified and misrepresenting their abilities. A resume and a 45-minute interview cannot reliably distinguish between them. If the employer cannot tell the difference, they offer a salary based on average expected quality. The best candidates, who know their own worth, reject the offer as too low. The employer is left with a pool skewed toward lower quality. This is why credentials exist: a university degree, a professional certification, a track record at a prestigious company. These are signals designed to solve the lemon problem. They are costly to obtain, which means only genuinely qualified people invest in acquiring them. The cost is what makes the signal credible. Michael Spence, who shared the Nobel Prize with Akerlof, formalized this as signaling theory. The entire global infrastructure of degrees, licenses, certifications, and professional accreditations is the labor market's immune system against the lemon virus. But signals can be counterfeited, and when they are, the market breaks again. A diploma mill in a strip mall outside a mid-sized city prints degrees that look identical to those from accredited universities. A LinkedIn profile lists certifications from organizations that exist only as websites. A resume claims 5 years of experience at a company that went bankrupt and whose records are inaccessible. The counterfeit signal is cheaper to produce than the real one. If enough counterfeit signals enter the market, genuine credentials lose their value. Employers stop trusting them. They demand more signals, more interviews, more tests, more references, which raises the cost of hiring for everyone. The lemon dynamic does not just degrade quality. It inflates the cost of trust across the entire system. Now bring Akerlof's framework into the digital economy, and its explanatory power becomes staggering. When you buy a product on Amazon, you face the classic lemon problem in its purest form. You cannot inspect the product. You cannot verify the seller's claims. You rely on photographs, descriptions, and reviews, all of which can be manipulated. And they are manipulated, massively. Research has estimated that a significant percentage of online reviews are fabricated, either planted by the seller to inflate ratings or posted by competitors to damage rivals. An entire industry exists to produce fake 5-star reviews at scale, with workers in click farms paid pennies per review to write convincing praise for products they have never touched. Amazon's response has been to build an elaborate infrastructure of verified purchase badges, seller ratings, return policies, buyer protection programs, and algorithmic fraud detection. Every single one of these features is a direct response to Akerlof's insight. Without them, buyers would stop trusting sellers. Good sellers would leave because they could not distinguish themselves from scammers. only lemons would remain. The fact that Amazon spends enormous resources policing fake reviews tells you exactly how powerful the lemon dynamic is, even 55 years after Akerlof described it. The counterfeit goods market is Akerlof's nightmare made physical. A handbag that looks identical to a $1,500 luxury brand sells for $40 on a street corner. The buyer may or may not know it is fake, but the existence of convincing counterfeits degrades the value of the genuine product. Because anyone carrying the real bag now faces the suspicion that it might be a copy. Luxury brands respond with increasingly elaborate authentication systems, serial numbers, holographic tags, blockchain-verified provenance, brand-owned resale platforms. These are signaling mechanisms, and the arms race between signal and counterfeit drives billions of dollars in spending. The lemon problem does not just cost consumers money. It forces legitimate producers to spend fortunes proving they are not lemons. Airbnb illustrates the lemon problem in the service economy. A listing shows beautiful photographs of a sunlit apartment with a view. The host has curated every image to present the ideal version of the space. What the photos do not show is the construction noise next door, the broken air conditioning, the stairwell that smells like cigarettes, or the host who takes 48 hours to respond to messages. The guest discovers the truth only after arriving, after booking, traveling, and paying. The sunk costs are enormous. Complaining to the platform might result in a partial refund, but the vacation day is already ruined. Airbnb has responded with superhost badges, verified photos, detailed review systems, and guest protection policies, all antibodies against the lemon virus. But the asymmetry persists. The host always knows more about the property than the guest, and the most dishonest hosts have the greatest incentive to invest in making their listings look perfect. Dating apps are lemon markets for human relationships. A profile is a used car listing for a person. The creator knows their own qualities far better than the viewer. People misrepresenting themselves have the most to gain from the platform. Those representing themselves honestly compete against curated, optimized, and sometimes outright fabricated profiles. The result is textbook adverse selection. The average quality of the experience degrades over time. Honest users become disillusioned and leave. The platform tilts toward profiles that bear little resemblance to reality. The peaches exit, the lemons remain. Dating platforms have responded with verification badges, video profiles, and prompts designed to be harder to fake. The same signaling tools every other lemon-afflicted market deploys. The lemon problem does not care whether the product is a car, an apartment, or a human being. The dynamics are identical. The real estate market operates under severe information asymmetry that most buyers never fully appreciate. A seller knows about the basement that floods every spring, the neighbor who plays drums at midnight, the property tax reassessment coming next year, the mold behind the bathroom tiles. Disclosure laws require sellers to report known defects, but enforcement is inconsistent, and known is a subjective standard. A home inspector spends 3 hours examining a property and writes a report. But an inspector cannot see inside walls, cannot test every electrical connection, cannot predict which pipe will burst in February. The seller lived in the house for 15 years. The buyer gets a 3-hour snapshot. The asymmetry is structural and permanent. This is why home warranties exist, why title insurance exists, why escrow exists, why real estate attorneys exist. Each one is a costly mechanism designed to mitigate a lemon problem that can never be fully eliminated. because the seller will always know more about the house than the buyer. The 2008 financial crisis is Akerlof's theory scaled to global catastrophe. Banks packaged thousands of individual mortgages into complex financial instruments called mortgage-backed securities and sold them to investors worldwide. The banks knew the quality of the underlying mortgages. They knew which borrowers were likely to default. The buyers did not. Rating agencies, whose job was to serve as the market's quality signal, gave these instruments their highest ratings, partly because they were paid by the banks who created them. The signal was corrupted. The peaches and lemons became indistinguishable. Investors believed they were buying safe, highly rated assets. They were buying toxic debt wrapped in a fraudulent signal. When the true quality was revealed, the market did not degrade gradually as Akerlof's model predicts for slow-moving markets. It collapsed overnight, triggering the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression and destroying trillions of dollars in wealth. The crisis was, at its core, a lemon problem at planetary scale, with a corrupted signaling mechanism that made it catastrophically worse. Akerlof's paper was partly inspired by his observations of markets in India, where he noticed the enormous variation in quality of goods sold in local bazaars, and the difficulty buyers faced in distinguishing good from bad. A spice merchant knew whether the saffron was pure or mixed with turmeric. The tourist buying it did not. He later wrote that the idea felt like a natural extension of the questions being asked at MIT in the late 1960s, as economists began challenging the assumption of perfect information that had underpinned classical economics for over a century. The most remarkable thing about the paper is its reception. 3 journals rejected it. The reviewers could not believe that such a simple idea could have such profound implications. If information asymmetry really could destroy markets, surely someone would have noticed. It was obvious. It was true. And it had always been there, hiding in plain sight in every transaction where one person knows more than the other, which is nearly every transaction that has ever occurred. You are living in the market for lemons right now. Every time you read a review, check a rating, ask for a warranty, demand a certification, or choose a brand you trust over a cheaper alternative you have never heard of, you are deploying a defense mechanism against a force that Akerlof proved could unravel the most basic economic infrastructure of civilization. The question is never whether the lemon problem exists. It always exists. The question is whether the signals you are relying on to distinguish peaches from lemons are real, or whether the signals themselves have become the newest, most sophisticated lemons of all. Because in a market where the reviews are purchased, the certifications are meaningless, and the ratings are gamed, you are back in 1970, standing on a used car lot, staring at a vehicle that looks perfect on the outside. And the seller is smiling, because they know something you do not.